Dora, good evening. Welcome
Hello.
to one more session of Code Night New Zealand. And tonight we have Bruno Lucas. Bruno, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I think you are on mute somehow.
Am I? Just 1 second.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, if you are back to with your mic,
Am I? Can you hear me?
The session, but at the moment I can't hear you. Somehow your mic is just muted.
Let me try.
Although it's not displaying muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think like
No.
There's a problem. Maybe like it's on my end. Let's see. Anyone like hearing us? Can you hear us? Me? Can you hear Bruno? Okay.
Speaker.
Let me see here.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, so it seems like it's on my end.
It's only on your end, so everyone else can hear me.
Yeah, I can't hear you. All of a sudden, like we just went live, and all of a sudden, the mics just stopped. Anyways, like, so if they can't hear you, all right. So it's on my end. So sorry about that. But like, Bruno, I think like just let me introduce the user group, and then I'll probably try fixing my headset in the, while like representing. But we have like an interesting session tonight. I comparing message brokers and event brokers for enterprise SaaS integration using Azure. Can you just say something, Bruno? Like I'm not hearing you, but I can just see that you're talking.
Yeah. So tonight we're gonna cover. We're gonna first try. I will explain the difference between message brokers and event brokers, advantages and disadvantages, and how they fit to integrate software as a service. Mostly, I'll be talking about the Dataverse Dynamics 365, but you can use that concept for any software as a service.
Okay, like, yeah, I can see like the visual, like, thanks for that, Bruno. But let me introduce like the user group. So if you are like coming here for the first time, so we are Code Nights user group, right? We're a community of developers that love coding and follow best practices on software development languages and technologies. In general, like we have like more sessions that are aligned to the Microsoft stack, but we're open to different technologies, right? So the intent of this user group is to enable developers to launch their careers by leveraging like, well, what we share in here, right? So if you're like a junior to a lead dev, you're gonna have like take a good advantage of the content that we bring to all in the community. I also would like to mention that we're part of Azure Cloud Native user group. That's where we talk about the latest coming like on the cloud native space. We're also like sponsored by the .NET Foundation, which is an entity that looks after the different .NET projects, open source projects. With no further ado, Bruno, I'd like to give you the floor. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know this is going to be a great content.
Thank you. All right. So can you see my screen? Yeah, here. So yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm a cloud chapter lead. I work mostly with Azure and Power Platform. I just got awarded the MVP this year. There's some information like my blog, what I'm going to, I'll get back to my blog later. And I have a GitHub where you can find the code, some sample code that I'm going to use for this presentation. I think like, yeah, I'll be sharing some of the URLs on the chat. So starting with a quick SAS definition, that's just like something I grabbed from the internet to satisfy a generic definition, but it's not exactly for like the purpose of integration. When you talk about pushing data into a SaaS application like Dataverse, you gotta consider there will be an entry door, an ingress, like a web API, and between the ingress to the data repo, you're gonna have like some data digestion, and the time it takes to process that is a bit of a mystery. Or you might be aware is one of those entities that has a lot of logic between. So it's not going to be a quick path from the entry point to the data, and that will affect the result of your integration depend of the broker you select. So here's like some famous software as a services platforms that you probably used, know, work with. My daily favorites are Power Platform, sometimes Microsoft 365 that include SharePoint, Outlook. And these two here are a little bit different. They escape from this problem of the business logic because Splunk and Dynatrace offer ingestion, and we're going to cover that later. It's just if you need to push some data like logs from Azure into Splunk or Dynatrace, they'll offer a proper ingress to that will fit very well for Event Hub or Kafka. So yeah, many SaaS offer a REST API for integration. Some may have long, complex business logic. Some have more business logic added, like beside what comes already with the regular package. There is also the business logic that you add for your in-house necessities. And beside that, Dataverse also has a throttle limit. So it is not only going to take a while to go from here to here, but also you cannot just put like several parallel instances, what could cause the system to turn off. You know, we're gonna see an example soon. So event-driven and message-driven, in theory, event-driven is instantaneous, is like a broadcast, similar to a radio. The antenna sends the radio listen in a fraction of seconds, or that's what they call real time or near real time. And message-driven is supposed to be more like a mailbox. Somebody put a package or a message inside of the mailbox, and you need to go and pick it up. It is not going to just fly to your desk. You got to go and perform an operation to open the door and pick it up. And how does it fit when you want to pick up one of those for a platform like a Dataverse, for example? Dataverse in many SaaS can't offer real-time to large amounts of messages. For example, that's like a real experience. I had like some time ago 40,000 messages to be pushed into Dataverse, and I've been asked to use Event Hub. It took about 4 days to push all of that through because of the entities receiving had a lot of business logic. So the real time there kind of got lost. You just, if and also like event hubs cannot order, so if you push 40,000 messages to an event hub and from the event hub to Dataverse, it's gonna take a few days for those messages to get in, and you don't know exactly which one will go first. In the tables, if the tables have complex business logic, the data insertion require relationships between entities, it may take long because you create one entity, collect the ID, create a relationship, so that takes even longer. And it's preferable for a system like that, for integration like that, to avoid duplicates. What can be a problem with Event Hub? Event Hub has what they call guaranteed to deliver at least once, and that can cause duplicates. And other possible needs, first in, first out. That's popular for applications like Dataverse. And you need like if you have no choice but to end up with having to go through that, you got to calculate your time for ingestion. So difference between event-driven and message-driven, again, in theory, event brokers stream while brokers poll. That is more like a theoretical concept. When it comes to Azure, both the Azure Function and Logic, if you use Azure Function and Logic Apps to communicate with Event Hub and or Service Bus, both you use long polling. So long polling works, it picks up a message and keep the connection open. And while that connection is open, whatever message arrives is going to flow through, more similar to what most people would expect from Event Hub, from event driven. So all of them will keep listening, and there will be like by default, for example, there's a 30 seconds wait. So you process like a 1,000 messages, then there is nothing for a while, and it stops that connection, wait 30 seconds, and reconnect again. So there's a tiny window there, but most of the time it is going to work like a constant listener. Then,
is this long polling configurable, Bruno?
Mildly. There, for example, for Event Hub and I believe Service Bus too, there is a setting there where you can make this 30 seconds shorter or long. I believe the minimum is 10 seconds. You can put a little longer. But one thing that I'm going to comment soon here, some triggers such as when one or more messages arrive in the queue, trigger can return one or more messages batch. That trigger somehow will accept a pause. So you can have your service bus, you select that trigger for multiple messages with a batch, and that will offer you wait time. And that allow you to do something like pick up 100 messages, wait 5 minutes, then pick up another 100 messages. That's different from long polling. Long polling, like if you have 100 messages and the other 300 arrive during the processing of the first 100, you keep working. That's long polling. What happens here with this trigger for logic apps is a proper pause, and I'm going to discuss that later. It's a pretty good thing to have when you systems like Dataverse, they have a throttle, and during the night you might have, for example, another integration dropping another 10,000, and then you have 2 points of integration. So it would be nice to have a digestion break, and you can do that with Service Bus and Logic Apps. So before getting there, that's another thing I want to comment that you're gonna hear often when looking to event and message brokers is the concept of guarantee to deliver at least once. That caught me on the first time thinking like, oh, cool. So as long as it make to the destination, cool. But that means at least once, and probably sometimes one more. That's equal duplicate. What you really want is guaranteed to deliver only once, and that can be accomplished for sure with Message Bus in Azure. Kafka provides that too. Is for right now it's not working through Azure Functions. Probably will be there soon at some time, but right now the only way you can get guaranteed to deliver only once is with Message Bus, and that's pretty great for very large amounts. If you use Event Hub, the problem that I ran into, it will keep a rate to about 30% of the messages you retry. So they process one time and then again, and you're gonna have like to add the duplication in the other end, and that the duplication consume a lot of resources, slow things down. It kind of feeds to slow that down, because like now I have a duplicate. Next time you try to insert again, it will be running a scan through the table to find a duplicate, and the system gets slower. So you want to avoid that. You want to go with guarantee to deliver only once. And both Logic Apps and Azure Functions for Service Bus and Event Hubs, they can process in parallel. Now let's get more into specifics. So the Azure Service Bus advantage, the way that they accomplish the deliver only once is through a thing called pick lock. So here on this diagram, the way that the pick lock works is the Azure function will pick up, we look into the queue, lock a message, process the message. After the message is processed, it will remove the message from the queue. So if a second instance, a parallel instance, come around here and try to snatch that message, it won't be able to because of the lock. So that's what pick lock is. And if you see here on the top right, I have a logic app showing how that works. I start with one or more messages arrive in a topic, pick lock, to lock the message. Then I do my operation there. And once my operation is completed, I do complete the message in a topic subscription. So that to remove the message from the queue. That will guarantee one integration only. So there will be no duplicates. And still, you need to look after the throttle. If you use logic apps and you don't come to concurrency and control, it is going to, the default is to use as many as your logic apps resources allow you to. So it will create this problem here, too many requests. The Dataverse has a throttle of 52 maximum concurrent calls from the same user. So for this here to happen, that means the concurrency control like passed 52 on the same time and knocked. You really don't want that to happen in production, because that will knock your Dataverse or any application that you have with a controlled input, and that might stop users from using the application. Another interesting thing about Service Bus, in premium, each message can go as big as 100 megabytes. So you can even like push some files, like some PDFs to SharePoint, for example. And other perks of the message service bus, you can control the time. The time is a lot longer, the time to leave. What I really like is the forward that letter message too. So when you think about integration, you got to plan for retries. Sometimes the data or for some reason it is going to cause an exception. And unlike Event Hub, Service Bus goes to what they call the dead letter queue. So this first one, you have like 3 numbers there. The first one is the message in the main queue, and the middle one is the dead letter. So one thing that you can do to reprocess is set up the dead letter forward to another queue and put a event listener there, like a logic app trigger or Azure function trigger to listen to that. So if it doesn't get successful on the first attempt, it comes here to the dead letter queue where you have a second shot. You can use a filter to see if there is any problem. Sometimes maybe an account owned by a service. So a lot more flexibility. In whatever doesn't get processed, never disappear. It has a 14 days to be processed. If it doesn't get processed in 14 days, it will just be pushed to the dead letter queue. And another interesting feature is the first in, first out that you can accomplish by enabling sessions. Now the trigger it's pretty straightforward. Let me see if probably be better to show here on the documentation page. So that's like a typical service bus trigger, and you can. The basics is the queue name or topic name and the connection here, and other attributes. If you wanna extend that, is batched. You enable is batched to true. If you wanna pull like more than one, you're gonna have to enable that, and other features that's interesting to see, like if Azure Functions use the host file for some settings, like prefetch is loading to the memory. You can change your protocol. So if you're a developer and you want to debug on Visual Studio, you probably want to live in WebSockets. Most companies today, even like normal computers, get blocked. The antivirus is going to block your TPC port. If you are at work and you have a problem, I want to ask your administrator for a proxy to bypass that. You can set it up here. So these two here are the secret to work with the Azure function debugging from Visual Studio. The retries. So yeah, pretty much is between like the settings you control for the Azure function will be on the host and on the trigger. And that's another interesting. You set that to true for an enable session to have the first in, first out. So yeah, and if you look on the trigger, that I was talking about before, when one or more, so that is a batch. When you want to pull a batch using logic apps, you have these settings here, and you can set an interval. So if you put that like for a 1 hour, it is going to pick up a batch of 20, wait for an hour. On this case here, like I put 3 minutes, it's going to be 3, and then come back and pick up another one. And that's not long polling. That's a really good trick to know when you have a system that's super busy and you need to provide a little break window for integration to digest, rather than like a check through and drop your allowance. So yeah, that's the only way I know right now you can do that. This setting here, interval, is not available in Azure Functions. So
in this case, like, so if you have like 100 messages coming 1 hour, and you're just processing 20, and then stopping. So
yes,
every single hour is you just have like the messages piling up, but then you only process 20 every single hour.
Yeah. So yeah, you also like got to bear in mind, if you put like a very short batch with a very long wait, things are going to start to pile. You don't want to. You gotta find, one of the tricks on my experience is to find the perfect number that you can pull in one single time, and then the interval to process that. What you can do, for example, like you can get 10, see the time that takes to process 10. Let's say it's 5 minutes to process 10. So you put like 6 minutes to give a minute break to reset a little bit the connections. But don't do anything like 10 messages in 1 hour of wait when you have like thousands of messages, because that's going to accumulate. Probably with Azure Functions, with Logic Apps, you could do something like a timer to change that, like 2 different flows, depending of, because a lot of people run batches overnight, or maybe there is whatever situation. There might be a company where there is a period on the evening where something happened here. Let me go back there. Yeah, some time of the day. In small companies, you can even change that directing product. I do not recommend, but like you could. So Azure Event Hubs. So I spoke a lot about the Service Bus, but why I'm so pro Service Bus, and why not Azure Event Hub? It's not you cannot, or I don't recommend using Event Hub. You just got to understand a couple things that can cause a lot of trouble, and one of them is the guarantee to deliver at least once. If you put for large amounts on Dataverse, Dataverse is one SaaS that usually will have some entities that have a lot of business logic, but could be a ServiceNow, could be any Salesforce. All of them, they could have an entity that's heavy on logic. And if you use Event Hub to push lots of messages, what will happen is, that's on the next slide, but I need to show that. Yeah, that's the diagram I want to show. So what happens with Event Hub is there's no pick lock. So you have your Azure function, for example, here. It comes, pick an event, then process. And when it is done, it mark a checkpoint. So until it come back to mark checkpoint, it got to do all that work to insert stuff inside of a system. What happened if it start to take too long? Azure Functions will spin another instance. That instance is going to grab that same message and try to insert that again, because there is no checkpoint there. That's why event hubs can create duplicates, and that's why it is called guaranteed to deliver at least once. This is going to happen regardless. This can happen if this one takes too long. I haven't seen that much happening if you do something like a proxy entity. So you create an entity that just meant to store the message without any processing or any other utility. It just receive the information. When I use that, out of 1,000, there will be like 10, 20 duplicates. If it is a top entity like clients, and every time you insert a client record, it will update a bunch of stuff, then it's going to be 30% of duplicates, more or less those numbers. So it starts to become a problem.
We got a question here.
Yep.
And just bring Bruno. On what scenarios would you recommend the autocomplete trigger in logic apps over the pick lock?
Say again?
So on what scenarios would you use the autocomplete over the pick lock?
Now, the pick lock and autocomplete used together. There is, you can use the other option on Service Bus. I didn't put here, but there is another one that will read and remove. So unlike a pick lock, it will pick up the message, delete during like the read, process, and you don't need to do the complete because like the first step already removed. I don't like that much because that doesn't, if there's any failure, like a failure that would be caught in a try catch, you don't have a second shot. That message will be gone, and then you're gonna have to do a replay. So this one, I think like using a pick lock with a complete is the preferable for any circumstances. Also, like you don't need to worry much about that getting locked for too long. You can set up in Service Bus a time to release the lock. But yeah, that's my favorite. Usually fits most of the scenarios. I don't remember when I used the other one that will remove the message from the queue upon reading. And yeah, the Service Bus, you don't have any of those settings. The Service Bus, you just read. I mean, sorry, the Event Hub. The Event Hub doesn't have a pick lock or anything. The Event Hub just read. And it works pretty well. What they mean by guaranteed to deliver at least once, it is respected. It does happen. It's just like you get to duplicate sometimes, but it will deliver. So it doesn't mean
in general, likewise. Sorry, I just saying like that. In general, I see some sort of aggregation layer because like you're going to have those duplicates, so you want to just consolidate them, and then perhaps process later.
Yeah. There is if you dig into the Microsoft documentation, there is a part over there. I'm gonna get there soon that explain a funny word that I learned recently called idempotency. I think it's the next slide. Yeah. So that word there means that word means controlling duplicates. So if you set idempotency to true, it is going to filter duplicates. That is available in Kafka and in Service Bus, but it's the way that it is addressed in Event Hub is you take care of that yourself. Let me see, I think it's on this link here. Yeah, the potency. So if you read this, it's pretty much telling you to sort it out yourself. That's the pattern. And the solution implementing the potency consumer with a message consumer that can handle duplicate messages correctly. So in Dataverse, you solve that with duplication detection. There is custom unique keys. In SQL Server, you can put like unique keys too, but you're gonna have to find sort on your end. Your destination application is gonna have to deal with that, and usually that cost in performance, because if it is a database or if it is an application, it is going to probably be scanning through the data repo looking for a duplicate before let the next operation start. So you can make a consumer idempotent by recording in the database the IDs of the message that it has processed successfully. So pretty much you sort it out yourself. So that's the cost of the Event Hub. Well, the function is very similar to the Service Bus one, and but even less options, because it's pretty much a listener. You put there the name of the topic, the connection string, and that will start pulling. You can set up batches, but what happened with batches here, it just let me see if I can show quickly some real code now. And we're gonna look into the Event Hub trigger. You see here I have an array and a for each.
Zoom in a little bit more.
Is it too small? How do I zoom
you can
that
go
out?
like 120% at the bottom. Yeah.
There.
Yeah. Okay.
A bit too big, but that's better. So if you set this up to a string, I mean to an array here, and the for each, I believe, did they set up here with not here, this one doesn't have, but on your host you can put like batch sizes. I didn't set up, but you can set up a batch size of 100. And on the hub, for hub triggers, what's going to happen with this is it's going to pull 100, then pull another 100 without any weight. Unlike the Service Bus with logic caps, there will be no break. The only difference, the purpose of batches in Event Hub trigger is to process them like this in a for each, and each pull will pick up a batch and throw in here. So there's no weight between that, what makes that stream very intense. And a very interesting article to understand is this one here. I'll post, see if I can post there. Jeff Holland explained really well what happened with batches, playing with batches. So he was trying to prove a way to order events in an Event Hub. So Event Hub does not support first in, first out. So what he tried to do is pull a batch and limit the parallel instance to 1. And then got pretty close. But the problem is, like, if you get to that point, you get an Event Hub to run 1 parallel instance, it will defeat the purpose of speed. That's what Event Hubs are wanted for speed. And having 1 parallel instance is not very ideal. I'll share some of those later on the chat. Same thing with the documentation. Those the attributes, they are less than the service bus. And you can set up the batch size in the host. Also the same thing, like if you have trouble at work or home with ports being closed, you can set up 2 WebSockets. Here you can enter a proxy that will reach the internet. And the retries are a bit more important in Event Hub because we don't have poison kills or dead letter kills in Event Hub. The second big problem with Event Hub, the maximum time to have a message in the hub is 7 days, and after that will just disappear. So you don't have much time to succeed. If you somehow that get clogged and you don't have how to process, that will probably expire and you're going to have to replay. So it is really designed for streaming with where like the receiver, I mean the sender and the receiver have very little between them. And then Kafka is kind of a between. It is a integration favorite if you go beyond Azure, and it does a few things like the guaranteed to deliver only once is called exactly once semantics in Kafka, and it is still not possible to do that using Azure Functions. There is this mode called Azure Event Hubs for Apache Kafka, but still, the limitation is on the Azure function for both. You need to start a transaction, and that's still not available. I've been like I mentioned that to the Azure team and waiting for an answer, but probably like it's not very hard to set it up. They just need to look to enhance the libraries that enable that. One thing that I like about the Azure Functions for Kafka, Microsoft put all of sample codes here, so you can clone that, and that you have like a pretty decent complete samples of how to use the trigger. I haven't found that for a Service Bus in Event Hub, but you can look into my GitHub after. And another, because like this, like the Kafka extension for Azure Function is quite new and it's still in progress. When I was working with that, I wanted to enable idempotency in Kafka. The parameter was there, but was not compiling, was throwing an error. So I raised that with Microsoft, and they were just on the way to release a new version of the Kafka NuGet. So after getting the latest, it compiled as well. So I suggest like if you're starting or whenever you can to update, like you go to the nuggets in Visual Studio, click on updates. If there is an update available, get the latest. If still doesn't work, raise with Microsoft. And here, another interesting thing that is popular with event brokers, but the Service Bus also does, is multiple listeners. So the concept of event driven is broadcasting to multiple listeners, and that's possible through consumer groups in Event Hub and Kafka. In Service Bus, you can have that too, using subscriptions, topic and subscriptions. It's just like you need to have at least not standard. I think it's the standard. It's this second option. The cheapest option of logic of a Service Bus will not have topics and subscriptions, but yeah, quite worthy. You can have like two applications listening, like a Dataverse here, and a ServiceNow here, and SharePoint here. So yeah, the retries, we already mentioned that. So Service Bus has the dead letter queue as an option for the retries, and you can push that to that letter queue that you have another listener there. Event Hub have the retries. You can set up like multiple retries on the Azure function level, for example. And one thing very important tip from experience is to log your correlation ID. So the correlation ID keep track of pinpoint where the points of integration. So if you have, for example, external system pushing to Event Hub, there will be a correlation ID there, and then another Azure function is going to pull from Hub to Dataverse, and there will be another correlation ID there. If anything goes wrong, you can pinpoint the last occurrence of that correlation ID and find where it broke and troubleshoot your system. Without that, get a little bit complicated. It's like a breadcrumb track.
Mm-hmm. Do you use like any libraries to wrap up like additional properties, including the correlation ID?
Yeah. For us, correlation ID has done quite well because sometimes it's a little complicated to do a reconciliation report. My previous role, we solved that with a reconciliation report. So you have like the initial database and the final database from the receiver. And we used data warehouse tools, ETL, to compare both based on an ID. By that time, it was not correlation ID. It was just like we were pass the PK from the original database to this destination, join them. If anything was missing, it would be picked up on the report, and then it would replay. Also, you use that like fine tune the integration. At some point, it was 100%. So, yeah, you can keep in mind like a correlation ID and reconciliation as your tuning and maintenance resources to track the efficiency of the integration. This one like is repeated. So yeah, that's I just created this logic app, and I didn't limit the number of parallel instances, and that exceeded the amount. It busted the throttle, the allowance of 52. And last tips for Azure function: use isolated. If you Google around, I don't have a link here, but if you Google around, you're gonna see Microsoft is planning on keeping isolated. There's rumors that in process might not be in the future plans. So if you're starting now, I recommend to use isolated. And before getting to the conclusions, just a quick look into the code that I have here. That's like an isolated Event Hub trigger. If you don't know, isolated allow you to do dependency injection. It runs on its own process, but I like the idea of having the dependency injection to add a pattern like this service. If you have like a lot of classes there, it start to get messy. This one, like you have your account services, it's going to your account entity, so get tidy and organized. Just a quick demo on the service bus. Let me see if it is, there is like a breakpoint there, just to show how this works when you're I love this tool here. That's a open source tool called the Service Bus Explorer. And here I have my Service Bus, the one that is Trigger is listening. So I'm just gonna, you gotta come to the account here, I believe. Send message. Here it is, send message. So I'm just gonna send this one here. And then you can see it picked that up. And there it is. So if I just let it go, it's going to process without any problem. You can see here, log the message. Of course, like make sure you have your logs to track important steps so you can troubleshoot if anything goes wrong. And again, like to use that type of debugging, you got to make sure you have your ports open or come to the host and have this enabled. The other option is AMQP. Just curiosity, AMQP is the Rabbit MQ protocol. That's the other broker that I didn't mention here, but I haven't seen. I don't remember last time I used or somebody used. Rabbit MQ is a message broker like Service Bus. Well, just like some conclusions, yeah, message brokers, I believe they're better suitable for software as a service because of the perks and options you have to control and throttle the integration. Event broker is better for data ingestion or platform as a service like a Cosmo, MongoDB, NoSQL DBs. They're awesome with Event Hub. Kafka is getting up, is always good. It has some of the features. Logic apps for Service Bus. With the logic apps, the only one right now you can deal with intervals. It's good to control the throttle. In Azure, both event and message brokers consumer use long polling. So yeah, if you want to have like something close to event driven, both will listen constantly. Consider Service Bus if you need first in, first out, or guaranteed to deliver only once. And from time to time, the connectors get different, and you gotta keep up with the updates from Microsoft, and do the make sure you have the latest nuggets, and you should be good. And the sample for this presentation is here. You can find on my GitHub. I'll share soon on the chat. And I think that's it. We are nearly 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
Any questions?
On time. No, we only got like that question I shared with you. If the audience has more questions, please just bring those to Bruno.
I'm trying to find out the window where the chat is because I want to post a share. If I don't find it,
would be on StreamYard.
I can also now just where is it? Well, if I don't find, I'll share later. You can get in touch with Marcel or
on the user group.
Yeah, on the user group, and I'll send some. I can send more information about this. So no questions?
No, I don't think. You're talking about like this with SharePoint, Dataverse. In throttling was always a problem. So you experience some pain.
Say again.
So you had like some.
Oh yeah, you
tough
mean
times.
with when I tried to first time I had to use Event Hub was not really put to me like, would you like to use Event Hub or something else? They just told me like, you need to use Event Hub because of the architects have used that before. And I tried to explain about the duplication problem, but sometimes it's too further down. You pick up some project that's ongoing and you don't have how to go back. So it is not impossible. It's still delivered, but I did have to create the duplication in the destination. What's not really ideal. It could have been more elegant.
Yeah. Well, we've all been like in the same path.
Yeah.
We got a question here from Shouty. So what kind of price tiers would you consider when you design the solution?
So that's a good question. The Service Bus is a little bit more expensive, but the hub can become more expensive. Like the most expensive part of the hub is the true output units. So it's like adding a true output unit, similar to adding a CPU into your Event Hub. So those super large Event Hubs are designed like to push millions of messages. And if you need to go that big, you just keep adding them. And a premium one with a couple might cost like $4,000, I guess, per month. So you can imagine, like, if you keep maximum, I think it's 40. It can get very expensive. But again, one unit for an application like Dataverse or ServiceNow or Salesforce might be enough. It might be, if you get away with the duplication problem, might be cheaper. So it's always a question, like, you got to put all of those factors into a table and see, well, this is not ideal, but it's a cheaper option, and maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah. Always pros and cons.
Yeah. Also, the other thing is the Azure. You gotta count all the Azure if you're going to use Azure function. There's the tiers, like we have a premium, and premium allows to optimal parallelization. If you wanna add like several parallel instances, the premium will give the maximum, but it comes to a cost.
I don't think we have like more questions, Bruno.
All right.
That was like a really interesting way of measuring when to adopt specific technologies and the trade-offs.
Yeah.
Based on your experience and the pain that you've experienced before.
Yep.
So I really appreciate like you coming like to this session and sharing like your experience with us.
That's a pleasure. And yeah, if you guys get into a integration project, this type of architecture is getting more and more popular. One thing that I observed is it's been there for a while, but there's a lot of people that haven't experimented and they don't see how that could possibly work, how something can be sent as a message and arrive, how that could be better than the old database end-to-end, like you insert into the database and have your API. It does work. You got to do one time, and it does offer like the ability of register and listening to messages rather than wait for a query. And it's pretty awesome for decoupled architectures. So you have your applications going to a central place. If you don't like a Dataverse, for example, you can replace it with Salesforce. And you are not going to need like to rewrite a bunch of code. You just remove the end between the hub to the Dataverse and put a new one from the hub to Salesforce.
All good. I think with that, we're finishing the session. Thank you again, Bruno. If you have like more updates in future, just feel free to ping us and come to present again.
Yep. I'll also post my blog there. It has a more information, not only about integration, but similar. And yeah, you can find how to contact me.
Cool. Thank you. And to the audience, I'm just saying that we're going to have like the global Azure happening in May here in Auckland at Microsoft office on the 11th, 12th, and on 13th, we're going to have it online. So that's coming next month. And we are opening for speakers. So if you have some contents to share, please submit like a session. I'll put like the link later on the user group. So you just have a look and then we can just talk about the next steps. We'll have a good evening and talk to you guys soon.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.